Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson of World Alternative Media here, and I'm here, of course, with author and economist John Thore, Freedom Force International, author of the book The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us. Now, we're also joined on the line by Dan Happel, who is a very interesting man from Montana. And John, you met him not that long ago. Can you tell us a bit about Dan and why it's so important to hear what he has to say about so many issues from Agenda 21 to property rights?
Yeah, first of all, Dan is actually a Hall of Fame member of Freedom Force International. We're very happy and blessed to have Dan aboard, and he's a very knowledgeable guy about Agenda 21. As I said, when I was down in Paso Robles, he was talking about Agenda 21 to us specifically. He also brought on another guy, Bob Fanning, which is a good friend of his from Montana as well. Very knowledgeable guy about finances. Dan has a lot of connections from what I've found out. I haven't gotten to know Dan too well yet, but from what I've learned from G. Edward Griffin and others, Dan is a very smart guy that has been in the freedom and liberty movement for a very long time. He has lots of knowledge and lots of great connections, and he's very knowledgeable about several topics, especially from what I got to learn about from him in Paso Robles.
Absolutely. Well, now, Dan, can you tell our viewers a bit about yourself, your expertise, and your past job positions?
Sure, Josh. My name is, again, Dan Happel, but I'm a fifth generation Montanan, but I am a businessman. I still have a business in Colorado, commercial construction business. I've worked in various capacities in the construction industry as well as architectural industry. Worked Corps of Engineers as a architect in training in Washington, D.C. back in the early 70s. I have held a position as a county commissioner. I've been involved with the Montana Republican Party in varying capacities over the last 10 years or so. I am the finance chair of the Montana Republican Party currently, and I've been involved with the freedom movement primarily because I'm concerned about the drift that I've seen over the last 40 years in our government and how we strayed away from the founding principles, the constitutional principles that should be the cornerstone of good government. And for that reason, I've been involved in a number of legislative bills in the state of Montana. I had some involvement in Colorado and some of the legislative activities there. And I guess I've been involved primarily because of that, because of the constitutionality. But then some years ago, I discovered a plan, and I guess that's the only way I can really describe it.
Yeah.
A plan to change our way of life in the United States and most of the developed world through a program called Agenda 21.
Mm-hmm.
And that is basically a catchphrase for the agenda for the 21st century.
Yeah, and I wanted to get to that actually because a lot of people will say that it's some kind of conspiracy theory, but it's set in stone pretty clearly. I mean, when was it developed? I think 1991, 1992 at the Rio Summit, and right now they're revamping it as Agenda 2030, and there's nothing theoretical about this at all. It's a very real thing that's happening, and unfortunately, people from both sides of the spectrum have completely left this issue to the dust and haven't talked about it when really it's such an important issue to talk about. Now, you offered anyone who can prove your thesis on Agenda 21 wrong $1,000 in the past. What is your thesis?
Well, my thesis is that we, through the program called Sustainability, that we are losing our national sovereignty and we are allowing our constitutional Republican form of government to be subverted and eventually eliminated in the I guess let's say rush toward a global government, which will be very socialistic, if not communistic, and that we are losing our country because we don't have political leadership that has the guts to stand up and admit that their oath of office does not allow them to do the things that they've been doing. And people need to understand that our so-called political leadership in this country is not only corrupt, but I think they're intentionally driving us down this path that will lead to global government.
Well, and of course, the founding fathers were quite clear that things should be left as much as possible to community rights, to individuals, and not large overseeing bodies, especially international government like United Nations and etc. And where can we find a lot of examples of Agenda 21 in society today?
It's in literally everything we do. You'll see it in administrative law. It's in the various cabinet-level agencies from one end to the other. And in 1995, 96, Bill Clinton actually put together the Office of Sustainability and made that part of most of our federal agency programs, that we were going to promote so-called sustainability. Well, the sustainability that they're talking about is absolutely 100% based on the articles at the UN summit at Rio and the document, white paper called Agenda 21.
Yeah, and of course, people like Maurice Strong were involved in that. I can't think of the Norwegian Prime Minister's name.
Gro Harlem Brundtland.
I'm bad with Norwegian names, even though I'm a good friend of John's here. So now, like, how long do you think it'll be before these globalists start sterilizing people? Because they're already convincing people through cultural Marxism that we as humans are all scum or maggots, as David Suzuki says.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's really true. We've seen that in the environmental movement, and that is a anti-humanist perspective that humans are nothing other than animals, and as animals that we have done irreparable damage to the world and to the natural environment. And the best thing that we can do to reverse that course is to reduce the population in a huge way. I mean, they're talking fewer than 1 billion people from over 7 billion people today. And they're also talking not just reduction of population, but kenneling us, moving us into environments, into cities where we can be easily controlled and take us off of the rural landscape, and that's a huge thing.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it's something that we see a lot of today. I mean, up in Manitoba here, we've seen a lot of people getting kind of forced to move into bigger areas, into big cities, and away from the countryside. And John, you mentioned something actually on the way out here about how they're starting to try and push that in Manitoba. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, there's several things that are happening in Manitoba right now. One of them is the development of building sewage connections for all communities and towns around. Like actually right now here, just a couple of 100 meters away, we actually have main force lines coming in for new sewage lines that we already pay for in taxes. They want us to implement this and to connect to it, but it would cost from anything from $20,000 to $40,000. And that I made the actual little bit of counting. I was counting on that and looking into it, and it would take me until I'm 90 years old to actually paid for me, instead of having my holding tank where I have right now. Yeah. So I'm definitely not for it. When we're working against it here, I heard from a person in my party, actually, I heard that the community of Ananola in Manitoba, just south of Riding Mountain, has become a ghost town. Forced to implement all of this, and what has happened there is everybody's leaving because they can't afford to connect to the sewage system. And what I heard is this is legislation, and we've got to look more into it further. Me and Josh will do. But it looks like there's legislation for all watersheds and all rivers that they're doing this, and it forces people to move into the cities.
Yeah. And of course, this is something that a lot of people will joke around about when it comes to, this sort of push towards complete eugenics and depopulation. But for example, people like Ted Turner have said things like that they want to depopulate the world by 60% so that buffalo can roam again. Like, it's just complete insanity. And another thing is the FEMA camps. Now, FEMA camps are a real thing that they actually have been planning for a while. Dan, can you go into what FEMA camps are and, evidence that they do exist in society today?
Well, I think there's obvious evidence that they exist. I certainly don't consider myself an expert on FEMA camps, but I do know that many of the old military facilities have been converted to emergency centers for relocation, and those can be used in a number of different ways. But that's happening in the United States and many of our military reservations that have been either decommissioned or have been reallocated. Mm-hmm. And this is something that I think we all have a concern about, that I don't think there's enough understanding of exactly how total that is. And my understanding right now is that there's something like capacity for somewhere around 20 million people in some of these relocation centers, and that's a significant amount of people. So,
well, you'd think that people would be a little bit clued off about this when it comes to historically what's happened with these kinds of camps. We've seen what happened in Nazi Germany, and they were depopulating for another reason. But altogether, it is in order to control the world, and which is probably one of the most insane ideologies you could possibly think of, to actually have control of the world. It's enough to try and control a municipality and force them into collectivism, but the entire world. So Dan, what do you think about what's going on in Paris with COP21 and this push to revamp Agenda 21 as Agenda 2030?
Well, I think it was originally intended that Agenda 21 would be fairly well implemented by the year 2000. And one thing about politicians, for the most part, they're cowardly. And when it came right down to it, they didn't have the guts, thank God, to initiate a lot of the programs that had to happen if they were to get that plan in place by 2000. Well, they put it off. Then it was 2010. Then it was 2015. Now, through COP21, they're saying 2030 is the drop-dead date. But the thing is, we have to realize one thing. Even though a lot of these programs are in their infancy or have not been fully implemented, take a look at what the Agenda 21 blueprint is about, and you will see an awful lot of these programs are well on their way and very close to becoming reality. And if you folks don't mind, I'd like to give a list of the activities that are considered unsustainable under Agenda 21, and it's in their own writings. This is not items that I've invented. These are in their own documents. Number one, for elimination by the year 2030 is private property rights. Number two, all forms of crop irrigation and all farming will be in commercial type farming through big agribusiness. Number three, livestock production and meat consumption will be largely a thing of the past. It will be only for the very, very rich, and it will be on a very limited basis. Privately owned vehicles and personal travel will be a thing of the past. Burning of fossil fuels for energy production or for individual travel will be a thing of the past. Single-family homes will be only for the very wealthy and the super elite. Most forms of mineral extraction and timber harvesting will be eliminated. And another thing that is part of that will be ski resorts, golf courses, and hydroelectric and various dams. They will be eliminated to protect the sustainability of the environment. And then the final item on that list that's really important is that the human population has to be reduced to fewer than 1 billion people. Well, now they've revamped that a little bit. They say if we can do everything else that's on their list of sustainable development activities, that we could actually increase that to somewhere around 2.5 billion people maximum. Well, that's a third. Even that is only a third of the population we have today.
Oh, that's so unbelievable to think that we have kind of just walked right into this, because, I mean, this has been going on for quite a long time. There's been enough warning signs of it. People like yourself and many others have been shouting about it for years and trying to get people aware of the fact that their government is trying to kill them for apparently the greater good of humanity. No, wait a second. No, they don't care about humanity. They care about the planet without humanity. And I mean, a lot of people kind of get in trouble for saying these words, but it is what people have been calling the New World Order for many, many years. And it's, I mean, Kissinger was talking about this in the 1960s. So what can people do to avoid this catastrophe? Because I mean, every human being is walking right into the slaughter here. And, you know, they've gotten us believing this kind of cultural Marxism to an extent. Like what you mentioned there sounds like the Communist Manifesto, like a new revamping of it. And it feels like they've gotten people on their side so much when it comes to environmentalism to actually support killing off the human race. So what can people do to kind of stop this from happening?
Well, first of all, people have to become involved. They have to learn, read, listen. They have to pay attention. They have to be involved in political activities at every level. They need to start at things as small and as simple as council meetings for city councils, for county commissions. They need to be involved with school board activities and make sure that the curriculum reflects the values of the families that have their kids in these schools. The Common Core curriculum right now is straight out of Agenda 21. It teaches collectivism, and people need to understand one thing. You mentioned the Communist Manifesto, that this is straight out of it. It absolutely is. If you look at the leaders of the international movement on sustainability, virtually everyone is either a hardcore world socialist or a communist or some form of collectivist mentality. The one thing that stands out in the U.S. form of government, and Canada got some of this too, even though Canada is a little bit different than the United States, but we're a country based on rule of law, and we're based on the rights of the individual versus the rights of the collective. And that is to protect the rights of the minority. If we live by law and we live by rule of law that protects everyone equally, then minorities are protected. And under collectivism, that is not the case. Minorities, you're subject to the rule of the mob, and that's something that people need to understand will be the case if we lose our constitutional Republican form of government. We need to get people that are citizens in our country that are as well educated and knowledgeable about the Constitution and what our foundational principles are as they are about what their favorite football team in the NFL or some other, the Canadian League.
Yeah.
It's just a sad state of affairs when our country and our citizens know more about a football player than they do about their own form of government.
Yeah, and it's gotten to the point where even a lot of Republicans are saying, we need to make America a better democracy. And I'm kind of thinking, wait a second, democracy? Aren't you Republican? I kind of find it interesting how the definitions and words have been switched around in the favor of those with the agenda of taking over, once again, a crazy notion, taking over the world. Actually, I wanted to kind of switch gears slightly, but of course it kind of plays into it as well because property rights, as you mentioned, are something that they're trying to take away through Agenda 21. Now, while some of the militiamen in Oregon are taking part in stupid and discrediting publicity stunts like challenging people to sumo wrestling matches, their point is very sound at the same time. Now, it appears Lavoy Finicum was murdered by government thugs as others, including Mr. Bundy, was arrested. Considering you've served on the Western Montana Bureau of Land Management Resource Advisory Council, I must ask your thoughts on what's happening in Oregon, as well as the previous situation at the Bundy Ranch in Nevada, because after all, as is mentioned on the BLM website for the Western Montana RAC, your motto is making significant progress towards consensus.
Well, one of the things that I've learned in serving in some of these different capacities and committees that there are an awful lot of well-intended and even very nice folks that are involved in federal and local government, as well as just advisory boards that don't have a clue about the depth of control that is being exercised on all of their activities. And we had a discussion. I was at a RAC meeting, as a matter of fact, day before yesterday, and I suggested they were putting together the agenda items for the next meeting we'll have in 3 months, and I suggested that they needed to invite Jennifer Fielder, Senator Jennifer Fielder, who is now, I believe, the main speaker for the American Lands Council, to come and talk to them about the public lands issue and how that relates to Montana and how it relates to the BLM and some of the other federal lands, and to dispel some of the distortions that I had heard at some of these various RAC meetings. I did that because I thought it was important that the people on this committee understand exactly what the truth is about the American Lands Council and about the push to take federal lands and put them under stronger control by the states. I've heard a lot of mis and disinformation on what that whole process was all about, and I thought this would be a fair way to air that information and to put Jennifer, she willingly would put herself as a target of this group if they would listen to what she had to say, and then they could challenge her on anything that she said. I'll tell you, I was attacked when I suggested that, and it was with absolutely no doubt about it. They did not want to hear one word about the American Lands Council or anything coming out of them. And it was the citizen group as well as the government folks were the ones that indicated they didn't want to hear it. Well, if you can't hear it, how are you going to know what the truth is?
Yeah, I hate to get too far into conspiracy theory here, but do you think some of these people might be insiders with the United Nations? Because, of course, there is this push to kind of put this whole agenda into different, different states and to try and implement these things from the inside out. And, have you... what do you think is the main reason behind what's happening in Oregon? It's someone's property. It's a farmer's rancher land. I mean, some of these people have had this land for generations and generations, and the federal government comes along and they say, "Well, that land is ours now, and you don't have a choice." And then when they do exactly what revolutionaries do, and pick up, their arms and defend their property, then they're called terrorists. Like, what do you think is actually going on right now in Oregon, and how do you think this is going to end up? Because obviously, right now there's people in prison for standing their ground and protecting their property.
Well, I have the privilege of being on a radio program down in Fort Collins, Colorado, with Ammon Bundy not that long ago.
Oh, great! And
I can tell you that my experience with the Bundy family is that they're very law-abiding, very decent, genuine citizens who just feel that we are losing our private property rights, and they are willing to take the government to task on that regard. They're not violent people. They're not in the comments about the militias and so forth. Most of the people that are involved in any of these activities are extremely law-abiding citizens that just recognize the fact that we've got a rogue government that's been militarized, and they're pretty much out of control in certain ways. Now, I'm not saying that every government person is a bad person. Most of them are extremely good people. But we've re-educated our entire culture to think in terms of military occupation, and think in terms of personal safety in ways that police agencies, sheriff's office. I mean, right now in Madison County, in the county I live in, I've just read an article in the paper. The county courthouse is getting ready to go through a major security upgrade because they're concerned about security issues. Well, it's nonsense. We're a county of 8,000 people, and one of the most nonviolent areas in the world as far as worrying about terrorism or anything else. I would much rather take my chances on terrorists taking over and then dealing with it when we have to, than to destroy our entire culture and to turn ourselves into a military camp. And that's exactly what's happened since 9/11. The Patriot Act is the most misnamed federal act that ever happened.
Yeah. And then followed by that is National Defense Authorization Act, these absurd provisions by the Department of Homeland Security to completely survey. And I mean, when I found out about what happened with the Bundy Ranch, first of all, I got butterflies when I saw the police stand down. These people are just exercising their constitutional rights. If I were to trust anyone, it would be them. They're the most law-abiding people you'll find, and they are standing for the ability to have voluntary action and not be controlled by a higher power that they didn't consent to. And I think it's quite amazing that people see them as terrorists. Some people say, well, one man's freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. Well, I would trust these guys over, government thugs in, body armor and, machine guns any day. And these people are actually standing for peace. They're standing for your ability to not be controlled. And I think that it's something that Americans and Canadians alike have lost sight of since the Constitution was written all those years ago. And I mean, let's remember the Constitution just enables your natural rights that you're born with. And no government can take rights. No government can give rights. Well, I should rephrase that. Government can try and take rights, and obviously it is today. But I think it's up to us as individuals, whether that be Canadian or American or British, etc. We're all going down the same road in this kind of world empire that they're creating. As nefarious as that sounds, it should sound that way, because that's exactly what it is. Now, I wanted to kind of talk about what's going on with the election down there, because as a Canadian, Canadians have a lot more enjoyment watching American elections happen than Canadian elections, because the most interesting characters, and at the same time, the amount of collectivism on both sides of the spectrum is frightening. Now, as horrendous of a woman Hillary Clinton may be, and as economically illiterate Bernie Sanders is, the Republican Party isn't looking too good neither right now. I mean, no one is truly standing up against collectivism, and it appears, as per usual, like one puppet after another. Everyone's competing to control the American people. So what's your take on this election, and what's something you really want to see happen during this campaign?
Well, my take on the election, and I believe that there are several candidates that I believe would do the right thing. I certainly think that Ted Cruz is one of those candidates that I believe he really truly does understand the Constitution. He has a record of supporting constitutional issues. He's been before the Supreme Court many times. He's very highly regarded as a debater and as a scholar, and I believe he's a legitimately good candidate. I don't know. Most of them become really kind of change their stripes when they get in elected public office, but I haven't seen that with Ted Cruz. I do have some concerns because his wife is a Goldman Sachs executive, and I know that she's had some involvement with the Council on Foreign Relations.
And I believe the Federal Reserve as well.
Yeah, that concerns me, but everything that I've seen out of Ted himself makes me believe that he may be a fairly good candidate. I was and have been and still am a Rand Paul fan. I was very much a Ron Paul fan when Ron was in
those were the days.
Congress. Yeah, those were the days. But I think Rand has not fallen that far from the tree. I was a little disappointed in him supporting McConnell, and some of the other things. But I think he would be a good candidate. I think a Rand Paul Ted Cruz ticket might be very interesting. Most of the others I'm not that thrilled with. I know there's a lot of interest right now with Donald Trump, and he has certainly brought some political interest to the whole process. I like that part of it, because we've got people now that are showing their contempt for the Republican Party by literally backing everything that they don't stand for.
Well, I mean, even Donald Trump himself said that he could go out in the streets and start shooting people, and he'll still have all the supporters. And in my personal opinion, that's kind of like him saying, hey, my supporters are stupid, and they'll support me no matter what I do. And, Donald Trump, I understand the excitement in him, because he does question the establishment, but at the same time, he shows some extreme collectivist kind of ideologies when it comes to things like the irresponsibility of, and even with Ted Cruz on this too, saying that you want to turn the sand or make the sand glow, and as Donald Trump said, just kill all of them. And I mean, that's not really good foreign policy. And at the same time, he's saying that he wants to monitor the internet. He wants to, implement registries and stuff like this. And this isn't the conservative way. So I feel like there's some parts of him that are kind of on the side of even fascism, and then some other real conservative principles. And to see them mixed up like that is really perplexing to me. But I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm sorry. It really is. I think most Americans have that that same kind of feeling of alienation from the whole process, because they know that a lot of these things are wrong, and but at the same time they're searching for some kind of leadership that we haven't had in a very long time, and I think we need to start looking for some new George Washingtons.
Absolutely. Some real warriors. And when I say warriors, I don't mean warmongers, because, I mean, that's something that I think would bring a lot of people back to the Republican Party, is the non-aggression principle of you only attack when you're attacked. And, I mean, the conservative way is really just to allow yourself freedom as an individual to work, to act, to be able to build a business, to be able to live in peace. And I mean, the Democratic Party, the Democrats, they terrify me, because first of all, unlike or despite the popular perception of them, they are warmongers. They do get themselves involved in countries around the world where they shouldn't be, trying to manipulate people's civil wars, arm and fund, rebels that became what we now know as ISIS, under Jimmy Carter, what we now know as Al-Qaeda, and stuff like that. And some people might argue that there is some reasonability to what they're doing, and I can understand it to an extent, but every time that we go around in this circle, things get worse and worse. And now the Republican Party is seen as like this warmongering party, when that doesn't make sense to the real conservative principles, because a real conservative doesn't go to their neighbor and destroy their property.
Well, and not just that, so-called real conservatives is actually what was also known and should be known as a classic liberal. And the classic liberals were, and I consider myself one, people that pretty much felt that they should be allowed to have as much freedom as possible, as long as it didn't infringe on the rights of others, and as long as it did not harm others.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree more about the us becoming the policemen of the world. That was never intended. No. Under our founding documents, and it was under Teddy Roosevelt that we started becoming aggressive and started to become an empire. And Teddy Roosevelt, even though he was supposedly a Republican, he was the first progressive socialist president that we ever had.
Yeah. And do you think that, I mean, it's gotten to a point where it kind of seems like the United States has become kind of what they ran away from. Like the Red Coat Britain was a world order, and they manipulated, governments. They went around the world screwing with civil wars and getting involved in places that they had no business. And one of the big reasons that the United States of America became its own league of states and nations was that they separated from this world order, and there's so many thousands of individuals who died fighting for the kinds of freedom, the liberty, the non-aggression principle, the right to individualism, and the right to free speech. I mean, the Constitution should not be ignored, but that seems to be something of the past now. It seems like the United States of America has just become this kind of new revamped version of the British world order, and it's exactly what the founding fathers, especially people like Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, spoke of getting away from.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, if you look at progressive socialism and you look at the influence of the Fabian Society, which is a British organization, but it took off in the United States as well. We've got a lot of common ideas, a lot of common ground, and we've also had the same kind of common corruption of our political processes in the British Isles and in the Commonwealth, and also in the United States. And it's because we have deviated from the common law that was the foundation of what I would call the freedom movement in Great Britain in the 18th century.
Oh, absolutely. It's unbelievable how huge collectivism has grown, and I mean, the Fabian Society, as you mentioned, has played a big role in this. John, what do you think of what's going on with the United States? And I mean, as a European, how do you feel about how, the United States has kind of become what, they escaped from in the first place?
Well, they tried to escape from this, and this is just a cycle. What's going on around the world, and the cycle is like a move from individualism to collectivism. That's the big cycle, and this is and the fall of the government when it becomes unsustainable. What I've seen is through my 25 plus years living in Norway, I lived through a hardcore socialist nation, which is always put up on a pedestal from the hardcore socialists as one of the brightest places in the world. I would say actually right now, if you go to Norway, it was pretty like certain things, like is you're free that we don't have the country, like Norway, the government owning land actually too much in Norway. They're actually letting us roam quite free on it. But on the other side, there's a lot of control. There's always surveillance on the roads. You have your taxes getting sent directly to the government itself before you even get to look at what you owe. I say what we're seeing and what we're seeing in the United States from a perspective of a Scandinavian that have lived in a socialist society is it's just a rapid move to wanting to become this socialist empire. What is seen though is socialism isn't sustainable, because what I've seen, I done a study where I looked at the big countries around the world, and the countries that have government that are actually spending over 50% of their GDP, that is just government spending in itself, those countries are the ones on the verge, like Greece, like Denmark. Norway is actually, without their oil, is 60%. Venezuela without their oil is about 95%, and so on. So there's a lot of countries that are, like, government has become unsustainable because they become over 50% of the total GDP. So the private sector can't afford to keep them up anymore and survive. So what is happening is we've seen a deterioration. So the government is not going to get any more taxes. So they have to go into mass amounts of debt. Look at the United States. Over the last years since Obama started, went from about 8, I believe, up to now 18.93 trillion dollars in debt. So what we're going to see is a lot of, I believe, debt accumulation, more and more. We're going to see more and more taxes if we continue down this road. What we need to do is we need to stop this and put in advocating low taxes. We need to advocate low government and hardcore individualism and voluntarism, where people actually are allowed to be free in their countries and live their lives without any government or invention from any kind of type of cartel of some sorts.
Yeah, this isn't mob rule or anything. This is the ability for people to take care of themselves, and then for the community to come together as individuals, not as a collective, and decide, hey, like, if it's not like we're talking about a lawless society here. I mean, you can't hurt other people. It's a golden rule, as Dan mentioned. You do good unto others and you don't hurt anybody. That's a message of liberty to, and I always say this one point here that there's only one person in this world that you truly have control over, and that is yourself. And without that, what's the point? I mean, what's a point in life if you can't even control yourself, when other people are coming in and telling you how to live your life and saying that they're protecting you? I mean, this is truly National Socialism. This is, and as many socialists and communists will mention to me online, which, trust me, we get a lot of hate mail. It's usually, our plan is to implement socialism, and once the economy collapses from the socialism, then we get communism. It's just one step towards communism. So both of you do great work with ideas like situations like what we have with the Freedom Force International and G. Edward Griffin. Freedom Force International is extraordinary. What they're doing, they're not trying to lobby anyone. They're not trying to coerce anyone. They're not trying to control anyone. Their whole idea is that you have ultimate freedom and you should exert that freedom, and I think that's such an amazing thing. Now, Dan, how can people help support you in the work you're doing, and how can people find you online?
Well, actually, I haven't set up a website for funding because I've always been self-funding. But the reality is we've got a number of projects that have taken place, and we need to support those efforts. I have worked with a movie director by the name of James Yeager, who has done a number of terrific documentary films. I'm in the latest one, which is called Midnight Ride. It is about how the police state is going to allow martial law to be declared by corrupt government officials, and how we'll lose the last of our civil liberties as a result of that. It's an excellent little film. It's called Midnight Ride. The company is known as Matrix Productions, and James has done a number of films, about a half a dozen. I've actually participated as a associate or executive producer on most of those films, but he started the first one with Fiat Empire about 10 years ago. And he's done cultural Marxism, corporate fascism, original intent. He's done a number of films that we need to support people like that. I've got several people that are good friends by the name of the Untersees, Untersee. He is a retired colonel from the Army, and he is a movie producer, and he put together a great little film that's going to be coming out later this year called Behold a Pale Horse. And that is about Agenda 21 in America and how that is going to take away all of our rights. I think people need to buy books. John, you met Bill Coate at the Freedom Force Congress. Bill Coate, good friend of mine, he's retired. He was the head of the intelligence school for the U.S. Marine Corps. He's a retired colonel, and he wrote a great little book on restoring the freedom in the country, and that book is called You, the Last Best Hope to Restore Our Nation. I'd like to see people buy that. That's available on Amazon, and the gentleman's name is Bill Coate, C-O-A-T-E. And there are so many good works out there. There's so many good books out there. And I will suggest if people are interested in Agenda 21 issues, just go to YouTube and pull up UN Agenda 21, and there's literally millions of viewing and listening possibilities there. And I did a video that's gotten quite a few hits called Sustainable Destruction.
I've seen that. Very good.
Exposing UN Agenda 21 in Rural America. And that applies to Canada as well as the United States.
Absolutely.
And that really explains the whole process of Agenda 21 in a way that virtually anybody can understand.
Yeah, and you do incredible work, Dan, and as well as the people that you mentioned there. I mean, these are the kinds of people that people should be listening to, not, as you mentioned, putting all their time and effort into learning the names of everybody on a football team. So I pushed the question to the viewer here. Do you want to be free, or do you want to be slaves? Thank you so much for joining us, Dan. It was very good talking to you, and we hope to speak with you again.
Well, thank you, Josh and John, and I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll be happy to come back to your program anytime you wish.
Thank you.